Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for all being here, being a part of the discussion, expressing your ideas and the work that you have been engaged in. But I do have to say that we sit here today in another iteration of the same hearing we've had over and over again in the 118th Congress. The sixth hearing of the same topic, a merry-go-round of Republican greatest rejections of conspiracy theories. We are here to attempt to once again discuss the same issue in a different way. Not once has my colleague, the chairman, requested any ideas from my side as to what we might agree on discussing as the weaponization of the federal government. I would say the IRS propensity to audit working class people, and especially people of color, rather than wealthy individuals, can show some weaponization of the federal government, or a book banning and censorship in schools and school districts receiving federal funding. As with many hearings, my Republican colleagues don't really want us to work together. Chairman Jordan has allowed his staff to provide the bare minimum notice for hearings without a subject or identifiable topic, without publicly announcing who the witnesses are, without even the decency to tell the minority anything. I know that we've come to think that that's normal, but that's not how Congress has always worked. This is in fact the sixth time in this select subcommittee that a hearing of ours has had the exact same name, Hearing on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. That's a broad topic and could mean anything. For the minority to prepare to engage with the majority with such a topic just is further demonstration how far we are from actually doing work. This is about platform. This is about speaking to Fox News. This is not about solving problems for the American people. We've come so far from what Congress has been, even in the short time that I've been here, which I can't believe is almost a decade now. It's shameful. So, I'll use my side in our discussion to talk about what we think is the weaponization of the federal government, what we believe to be the real threat to our democracy and the rule of law. The attempted weaponization of the federal government during the Trump administration, or even more frightening, the extreme weaponization of the federal government that the former president has told us he will do if he is reelected. Just since our last hearing, the fifth hearing, former President Trump has made more terrifying statements on the weaponization of the federal government should he have a second term. Donald Trump has said he will, quote, act like a dictator on day one of any second term. He has said he would proudly claim full credit for overturning Roe v. Wade, a woman's protection from overbearing state and her right to privacy. He's argued in court as a legal argument that he would have full immunity as president even if he ordered the assassination of individual Americans. He says he's going to lay off thousands of non-political career diplomats, replacing experienced government experts that serve with distinction with individuals whose main quality is passing a loyalty test to him. He has vowed to appoint a special prosecutor just to go after Joe Biden and his entire family, threatening them multiple times because he doesn't like them and they are a threat to him, not to our country. Trump and his followers are obsessed with charging Biden or any Biden individual for a set of wildly changing charges with a real set of projection in that to things that he himself and his own family have done, for charges that our congressional Republicans still cannot seem to produce documents or their own witnesses to corroborate. Now, one of the other statements that I gave to you a little earlier to remove non-political career diplomats with individuals who are willing to take a loyalty pledge is also very troubling. It should be obvious to anyone that replacing these qualified people en masse with expressly political operatives of any stripe would undermine Americans' interests and is the hallmark of a fascist state. And finally, the sick, audacious notion that a president could order the assassination of an American citizen at will without a single legal consequence runs aground of every American sense of right and wrong. That is what Donald Trump argues he can do. Not in public speeches alone that could just be campaign promises or rhetoric, but in a federal court filing where his attorneys must put the argument requested and discussed with their client, Donald Trump. Donald Trump believes as president that he can deploy, let's think about this, the American military on American soil to attack an American target, an individual, which, in this hypothetical example, has not declared any form of hostility towards the American state itself, but is merely who the president believes is not his friend or agrees with him. This idea is, and this is my own legal parlance, the craziest illegal, dictatorial, despotic, demagoguery, autocratic crap I've ever heard. Today, the chair is going to have us go through another round of claims about the weaponization that are his witnesses' beliefs about social media on the part of the federal government. The chair and my Republican colleagues on this subcommittee will ignore or try to make light of or even mock the unmistakable promises Donald Trump has made to weaponize the government on his own behalf. Where are the hearings about a former president who believes he can use the federal government to kill his political opponents? Where is the hearing about a president who believes that the most important quality of his appointments to run the greatest and most important country in the world is that they are loyal solely to him? Where is the hearing to discuss, never mind Trump, but even the idea? Let's not just make it about Trump. Let's have a hearing about the idea of a president using the resources of the federal government, the appointment of a special prosecutor to go after those he deemed to be the enemy, not of this country, not of this ideals, but of national security, but of himself. And if you don't think I am thinking this, if you don't think that this is my thought and important to me, let's take it from the word of people who work directly with the man. John Bolton, former National Security Advisor to Donald Trump. I think Trump will cause significant damage in a second term, damage that in some cases will be irreparable. John Kelly, his former chief of staff, said in a second term, it's just simply would be chaotic because he'd continually be trying to exceed his authority, but the sycophants would go along with it. It would be a nonstop gunfight with the Congress and the courts. Bill Barr, President Trump's former Attorney General, I think for people going into that second term of Trump administration, I think they have to be ready to oppose the abuse of government power. That's the weaponization of the federal government. But I don't think that's ever going to be a topic that the majority is going to bring for us. So we, the majority, will have to bring it for you. And with that, I yield back.
Without objection, all of
Agree. Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Gentleman's time has expired. The
Excuse
gentlelady
me,
from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I have a point of order. In your last statement, you said that Steve Jensen of the FBI opposed the collection of this information for banks. That's a misrepresentation of his testimony.
It's not an appropriate
Jensen
point of order.
said
The
that the
gentlelady from
information was
Florida
not
is
used. Would
recognized
you
for 5
release the
minutes.
transcript so that we can hear
Not an
exactly
appropriate-
what
it's
Mr. Jensen
Not an appropriate
said?
point of order, and the gentlelady knows that, but she continues to try to ask
Same way you
a
do.
question that is
Same
not a
way
point of
You interject,
I don't think
sir.
I've raised one point of order today.
You interject all the
The
time,
gentlelady from
sir.
Florida is recognized.
All the time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I'm actually I continue to be stunned by the big government advocates that we come across and the ones that serve in this very chamber. They're not even hiding it anymore. They're saying the quiet part out loud. They want dependency, they want control.
Gentleman yields back. I know you guys have been sitting there for 3 hours. We appreciate it. We just have 2 more to go, and then the committee will adjourn. So I'll recognize the ranking member for a second round of questions.
Thank you. I don't really have a round of questioning. I thought we were going to do just 2 minutes, or
2 minutes, whatever you want.
Yeah. But I just want to thank you all for being here, for saying what your beliefs are, your recollections, as you can recall them, were. I think it's interesting that we are discussing free speech, and yet this committee is censoring speech and giving the American people only a slice of information that they want them to see. And they're trying to use the guise of, we don't want our other witnesses to know what we're going to be questioning people on, is the excuse to why they won't give the American people the whole truth. They're going to say there's coercion, but there's evidence of no coercion. They don't want to put that forward. And they don't think that that's a problem. They don't see that there's an issue with that. That's absolutely insane. We've been doing this. You see some of these transcripts that I had were from 2023. They haven't been able to talk to the witnesses since then to be able to release that. They've only released 2 of these transcripts at this point. I got a stack of them here that are still waiting to be released. And they don't want to release them because this is all part of their scheme to keep the truth that there was not coercion going on with these social media companies. And they need these companies not to do their job now as we start into the 2024 presidential election. And when they talk about the discussion of White House with these media companies, I've got a transcript here from an interview with an Amazon employee where the question is, so just to be clear, it was during the Trump White House that Amazon and other tech companies were first asked to work on the issue of rooting out COVID misinformation? Answer, yes, that's my recollection. Because we were in a pandemic, and it was incumbent on our government, along with these social media companies, along with health experts, along with cable news, along with members of Congress who, if we can recall, voted for funding to support the vaccine, all working together to try and stop the deaths of Americans and people around the world. Did that information and what we knew about the vaccine change over time? Of course it did. I can recall when we were told you could only transmit it by hand-to-hand or by touch. We didn't even know it was airborne initially, and that changed. But the work of our government is important, and we don't want these social media companies chilled in their own rooting out of misinformation and disinformation, particularly from our adversaries, as we go into this next election. And so, Mr. Chairman, once again, for all things congressional, can we move on to another hearing to discuss some weaponizations of other areas? I've given you 2 or 3 other topics that we can talk about. In other committees, they will at least give a member of the minority 1 hearing at least on a topic that we can agree on, that is weaponization. Let's not continue the weaponization by Congress of social media companies. With that, I yield back.
Key member for an opening statement.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone that's with us today. While today is only our 9th hearing in this select committee, which I note opened with much fanfare from my colleagues on the right, it's the 6th hearing, like a Groundhog Day, for the same supposed weaponization of social media through the curious case of the so-called Twitter files, Facebook files, social media files, however we want to couch it. The idea that the FBI and the Biden administration have stopped social media companies from free speech. At first I thought, when I heard this at the beginning, it's just my poor colleagues doing the bidding of Elon Musk, who's no fan of American democracy or the great diversity of this country. Is that what's going on here? What's really up their sleeve? It eventually came to light, though, that this is about the continual projection that the Republicans engage in themselves. This is about them intimidating social media companies to stop engaging in reviewing and moderating content before the 2024 election. And it's working. Media, and particularly social media executives and professionals, have been targeted, harassed, intimidated by this committee and the many hordes that follow behind them on Twitter and other places. And they're afraid to do their job. They're afraid to speak up. They're afraid to do their work on those very same platforms. That's well done. Well done. And guess what? You know how we did this? We did this by spending $20 million. Yes, that's how much this committee has spent to have 9 hearings, 6 of which are repeat hearings. $20 million. My fiscally conservative, budget-conscious, don't grow the government coffers friends have spent $20 million to have 9 hearings, 6 of which are about the very same subject. Now, what's even more interesting is I love when people give you half a sentence and then don't respond with what the answer is. And they've been doing this repeatedly, and you're gonna hear this throughout this hearing. For example, that first, what was up on the board there, can we include that the White House put pressure on us to censor the lab leak theory? That looks like a question that he's asking his executives, Mark Zuckerberg. What about the answer? The answer was, I don't think that they put specific pressure on that theory. That's the answer. So the answer was no. But he doesn't want to show you that part because that doesn't help the argument that he's making. The other one that he did, where he says, that's a question. Luke, were you asking if there were threats, like if you don't do what we want, a content moderation, we're going to sick Lena Khan on you, or we're going to go after? And Nick, maybe you could answer just the subsequent question. The answer is, we were never sort of threatened with any. That's the answer. And you're gonna hear this repeatedly. That's the answer. They weren't threatened. They were informed, they were asked, they were questioned, things were pointed out to them, but the social media content people did what they wanted to do. That's how a private enterprise works. What's gonna happen now is, I'm gonna give you a preview of what's gonna happen in this hearing, because I've been sitting in this chair for a while, and I think I kinda know the Groundhog Day and how it goes. Up at the top row, we're going to get a poster with a tweet supposedly demonstrating how a member got labeled by social media company as sharing potentially misinformation on COVID. That's gonna happen. Then somewhere else down the line, we're going to hear about censorship in another country like Canada and how we as Americans need to be afraid of that happening here and how we need to make sure that that doesn't happen, and that's why we're having this hearing. Then wait for it, because you know it's coming. We're gonna hear about Hunter's laptop, because you gotta hear about the laptop. You don't have a hearing unless you hear about Hunter's laptop. And you're gonna hear the story about how it was squashed by the FBI and Trump would have won if that had been able to get out in more social media outlets. You're gonna hear that one. And then finally, the final campfire story that you're gonna hear lower down there is about how scary the FBI is. Because now they're going after people that look like them. You're gonna hear that. That's gonna be part of this hearing. So everybody can go, because I've just outlined for you what we're going to do. Or you can watch the tapes of the 6 other hearings we've done, sometimes with the same witnesses. Thankfully, goodness, we've got some new witnesses here. We did bring back one because it's the same subject. But I do want to thank the witnesses today, all of whom are appearing in front of this select committee voluntarily. Then I'd also like to share with you all why we're hearing these witnesses, this twist on the social media spin that's important right now. Why this is so prescient, having this hearing with these witnesses. Republicans are holding this hearing today in a last-ditch effort to influence the Supreme Court opinion in the case of Murphy v. Missouri. That's what's going on right now. During oral arguments in March, 6 justices questioned Republicans' claim that the federal government interactions with social media companies are tantamount to censorship. The Supreme Court is presently working in their chambers, preparing and thinking and contemplating what that decision is going to be. So when the chairman sent a letter to several of the witnesses asking that they testify today, the initial response was, shouldn't we wait until this court's decision? Wouldn't it be bad form to hold this hearing now and use the US Congress to unduly influence the decision? That's exactly what we want to do, is the answer. That's exactly why we're holding this hearing now, because we do want to influence the decision. We do want to use Congress for that. There's no doubt that this is completely inappropriate use of congressional oversight powers, that my colleagues are the biggest projectors ever. You know, they're like the bad boyfriend who tells you that you're the bad person when they're the ones doing the same thing that they're accusing you of. Let's take a step back and remember where we were during this time in 2021. And how, when we think about all of that, think about the projecting they're doing of using this Congress, this body, to weaponize the federal government. This Congress is actually weaponizing against social media companies. So in 2021, President Biden had just assumed office in the wake of a coup attempt that many on the other side still refuse to identify as such. More than 3,000 Americans were dying a day of COVID. 3,000 a day. That's what was happening while all of this is going on that they're discussing. Doctors, nurses, public health authorities were working to roll out a vaccine that the former president, Donald Trump, his administration initiated. Did we forget that part? We forgot warp speed. Remember that? They wanted the vaccine until they weren't in office, and then you don't want them at vaccine because it's not your president who's the one who's rolling it out. That was done to stem the tide of deaths in the face of mounting waves of conspiracy theories claiming without evidence that the vaccine was not safe. This is, while I'll repeat it, 3,000 Americans a day were dying from the direct effects of COVID. These conspiracy theories were downright dangerous. The conspiracy theories I'm referring to weren't just, now, you know, and I love her music, Nicki Minaj sharing a story that a friend of her cousin from Trinidad, something bad happened to him in his private parts after he took the vaccine. Remember that one? That the Republican majority has even used our select committee to give a platform to continue Robert Kennedy Jr.'s claim that COVID was purportedly bioengineered in a lab to target Black people, but to spare Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese people. These false claims that target Black people specifically, let me say, playing on the echoes of very real historic medical experimentation on Black people in America that were tantamount to genocide. For those unfamiliar, I'm referring to a moment the Tuskegee studies that the federal government ran from 1932 to 1972 in Alabama, or the centuries of experimentation on Black women because it's believed that we have a higher pain tolerance to be able to endure such experimentation. Robert Kennedy Jr.'s claims directly echoed those centuries past that as well scapegoated Jewish people and held entire communities collectively responsible for illnesses like the Black Plague, often as a precursor for massacres and pogroms. It should be no surprise, it shouldn't surprise anyone that Mr. Slavitt, Mr. Flaherty, and others in the Biden administration were concerned about these types of flagrant misinformation. They were trying to stop a once-in-a-lifetime global pandemic that had already claimed far too many lives. So yes, Mr. Slavitt and Mr. Flaherty talked to technology companies about what they were doing to stop misinformation. This isn't a violation of the First Amendment to do that. It's an example of the Biden administration doing the work that a president has been elected to do, to keep Americans safe, to check on how companies are using their platforms to inform Americans. Unless the majority forget, the government is entitled to speak for itself. It's entitled to inform, persuade, and yes, even to criticize private speakers. If you want to have First Amendment, have it for everybody. Don't just have it for who you want. Just as Justice Kavanaugh noted during the recent oral arguments, and his quote is, "My experience is in the United States in all its manifestations has regularly communications with media to talk about things they don't like or don't want to see or complaining about factual inaccuracies," end of quote. In fact, Mr. Jordan's own staff regularly communicates with the press. He and I communicated with the press about the content of articles, and you know what? We're entitled to do that. The chairman and the majority claimed that Mr. Flaherty and Mr. Slavitt somehow, quote, coerced social media and technology companies into removing content. But this committee, Republican staff, have gathered hundreds of hours of testimony showing that that is simply not the case. Over and over again in those testimonies, you'll see social media company executives told the committee that no matter who identified concerning content, whether it's a member of the general public, members of Congress, the White House employees, the companies evaluated the content against their own internal policies, only took action if the content violated those policies. And over again, social media company executives told the committee in no uncertain terms that no government official ever coerced them into taking action, no government official ever threatened them with any adverse consequences if their companies did not take action, and no government official ever promised them any benefits if they did take action. The committee has heard hours of testimony to that effect, but the majority has consistently rebuked our side, the minority's request that the testimonies be made public. The majority, who has controlled the tapes, likewise declined to provide us with copies of hundreds of hours of video taken during those investigations. That's because they know the evidence shows that their big investigation, their $20 million investigation, is a flop. Just like their impeachment investigation was a flop. Has anyone forgotten that the investigation hinged entirely on a 1023 form that was later determined to be completely fabricated? That's right, the key witness turned out to be passing along what may well have been Russian disinformation. And apparently that's the name of the game now. The extreme MAGA majority has spent its time, not to mention tons of taxpayer dollars, on baseless investigations that have gone nowhere. All of it in an effort to bully tech and media companies into turning a blind eye to right-wing extremist conspiracies that spread across their platforms, even when those theories violate very basic terms of service about deliberate disinformation and promoting violence. They haven't uncovered any quote-unquote weaponization in the federal government. If anything, it's the committee that has been weaponized for a 2024 election. It's no accident, as I said, that we're holding this hearing today as a Supreme Court opinion in Murphy versus Missouri, a case brought on by Republican State's Attorney General, vociferously supported by committee Republicans so much so that they even have an amicus brief on it. We're having this hearing now. So I say, let's tell the whole truth. The hours of witness testimony showing that there is no there to Republican claims. So with that, I'm going to move to introduce into the record the transcript from the committee's May 16, 2023 interview with an employee of Meta Security Police Policy Division. I'd like to introduce into the record the transcript from the committee's June 20th, 2023 interview with Meta's Vice President for Public Policy, the transcript of the committee's June 21st, 2023 interview with Meta's Head of Security Policy, the transcript from the committee's July 25th, 2023 interview with Meta Misinformation Policy Employee, the transcript from the committee's 2023 interview with Meta Trust and Safety Policy Employee, the transcript from the committee's March 1st, 2024 interview with Meta's President of Global Affairs, the transcript of the committee's May 22nd, 2023 interview with Meta External Affairs Manager, the transcript from the committee's May 23rd, 2023 interview with the former federal partner manager at Meta, the transcript from the committee's May 31st, 2023 interview with Meta Programs and Partnership Team Lead, the transcript from the committee's June 14th, 2023 interview with the Meta Trust and Security Policy Manager, the transcript from the committee's June 27, 2023 interview with the former Public Policy Liaison at Meta, the transcript of the committee's September 19th, 2023 interview with the Security Engineering Manager of Meta, the transcript from the committee's May 23, 2023 interview with the Director of Google's Trust and Safety Organization, the transcript of the committee's June 22nd, 2023 interview with Google Legal Division employee, the transcript from the committee's July 19, 2023 interview with the employee of Google's Privacy, Security, and Safety Division, the transcript from the committee's May 24, 2023 interview with Google Trust and Safety Analyst, the transcript from the committee's June 1st, 2023 interview with a former Google Search employee, the transcript of the committee's June 16th, 2023 interview with YouTube employee who worked on external partnerships, transcript from the committee's June 23rd, 2023 interview with Google's Government Affairs and Public Policy organizational employee, the transcript from the committee's June 26, 2023 interview with Google's Information Quality Strategy employee, the transcript from the committee's June 28, 2023 with a Google Legal Security employee, transcript from the committee's April 10th, 2024 interview with a former Google Global Affairs organizational employee, transcript from the committee's April 25th, 2024 interview with the former Public Policy Manager of YouTube, transcript from the committee's November 1st, 2023 interview with the former Head of Trust and Safety at Twitter, the transcript from the committee's April 16th, 2024 interview with Amazon Public Policy and Community Engagement Division employee, the transcript of the committee's June 6, 2023 interview with the University of Washington Associate Professor Kate Starbird, the transcript from the committee's June 23rd interview with the founder and director of Stanford Internet Observatory at Stanford University, Alexander Stamos, the transcript from the committee's November 2nd, 2023 interview with the former employee for the Center for Internet Security.
Object.
Objection being raised. I would just say that we plan to release all these once we've talked to everyone we've interviewed and their counsel to make sure they're comfortable with it. When we get all that clear, we plan on releasing all that and the video as well. Chair now recognizes, without objection,
We're not asking them to be released. We're asking them to be recorded. You can enter them into the record and not release them.
And the gentleman objected to that. Without objection, all other opening statements will be included in the record. We now introduce today's witnesses. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate your patience for what was.
They insisted, as was their right under the law, that the DA put me before the grand jury.
Right.
So that I was scheduled for a Monday. On the Friday before, I gave the DA's office the courtesy of a Zoom conference for about an hour and a half. 8 assistant district attorneys and me on the other end. I explained They didn't really ask me any questions. They just said, what do you want to say? Nice, warm greeting for somebody who's trying to show them the right path quietly and privately so that they could correct their error before they made it. Here's what happened.
We'll stop there, Mr. Costa. We'll get back to you during the questions, okay?
Did I run out of my time already?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. That's
But
fine.
I had 8 minutes. This says I have 138 to go, or is I'm 138 over?
138 over.
I'm sorry.
That's fine. That's
Excuse
fine.
me, Mr. Chair, point of order.
Yeah.
Will the witnesses all be given 7, 8 minutes? What is that?
Yeah.
It's usually 5, so we didn't know that in advance to be able to
We're going to give him a
tell
little
our
extra
witness.
time. I gave you 14.
But she didn't have time to prepare 8 minutes of testimony,
Well,
opening statement.
She's a smart lawyer. She can probably ad lib for a few minutes if she'd
Well,
like, but that's
we'd like
totally
it
up to
to
her.
be something more than ad lib, as we just heard.
We
or
listened to
testifying.
you talk for 14 minutes and
That's
and
called an
14
opening
seconds.
statement. I'm
I
allowed
know,
to
and
talk as long as I want.
And I was fine. I let you go 14 minutes and 14 seconds.
You have to let me go for 14 minutes
That's
if that's
exactly
what I
right.
want to do.
Exactly.
But
Exactly right. Mr.
you could
Trustee,
let
you
us
are
have-
recognized for your opening
The
statement.
courtesy of advance notice would have been helpful. Good morning to everyone that is here with us. Thank you for joining. 2 weeks ago in this same room, we watched as the Republican majority attempted to use the congressional hearing process to intervene in an ongoing Supreme Court case. Republicans here did so by suggesting that they were concerned about how social media companies are bullied by the federal government. In truth, these arguments are operating in the interests of securing an open season where Russia and China can destabilize our democracy at will in the 2024 election. By my Republican counterparts causing people to bully social media companies, they want to allow any and all foreign adversaries to dump lies and misinformation on social media in support of a would-be fascist former president. And now you're back. Why are we back this time? We're here because former President Trump is on trial in New York. That's why we're here. On Monday and Tuesday of this week, his former attorney, Michael Cohen, delivered devastating testimony implicating former President Trump in a hush money payment scheme. His former attorney even had audio recordings of Trump talking about those payments. Whether we think the trial in New York is a good case or a bad case, the truth remains that the facts in the case don't help Donald Trump. We're here because Donald Trump knows that the evidence against him is plentiful and that the testimony of his literal, as my teenage daughter says, literal partner in crime in this case is harmful to his criminal defense and his political prospects. This is not that complicated. The truth hurts. And here's one. We all know that the former president exacts loyalty from all of his followers, and especially GOP officials and those that work for him. Blind loyalty. And this case is no different. Many of them have hightailed it to New York City to show him that they are with him and standing with Donald Trump. Trump, in turn, demands that every Republican official serve him like the incorrigible, degenerate, spoiled brat that he is, and use their positions to aid his criminal defense. And even after the embarrassment of recent hearings today, Donald Trump and his cronies don't think that the chairman is doing enough. We're here today simply because Donald Trump's sycophants have been taunting the members of this committee on the GOP side and judiciary Republicans for not doing anything tangible to defend Trump against our judicial system. Lackeys like Natalie Winters, a Trump loyalist and an executive producer for Steve Bannon's show, have been mocking Chairman Jordan's leadership of the committee openly. As you can see up there, when the House Judiciary tweeted, "Imagine actually believing Michael Cohen," she retweeted and said, "Imagine actually believing at GOP, at Judiciary GOP, will do anything about it. Just as one example, on Monday, she put that tweet up, and then Fox's Maria Bartiromo and Steve Bannon himself have gotten into the act. And here they are.
Why aren't you being louder about this? Why aren't I hearing anything from this committee? I had to just ask you about it, okay? Just let me be clear. Viewers are sick and tired of hearings. They're sick and tired of letters. They're sick and tired of hearing complaints. They want action. President Trump is in a trial all day long, every day in New York City. Where is this committee of weaponization, and what are you doing about it? I just spoke with Kevin Hassett, the former chairman of the White House Economics Council, and he said, make no mistake, if we see President Trump go to jail because he violated this gag order, markets will react. Okay, Congressman, we're losing the country. So with all due respect, I'm not blaming you specifically, but it's not enough to set up a committee that's called the weaponization of federal government. That's not doing it for anybody. We want to hear more from you. We want to hear action. We want to know what the heck is going on in this New York trial where nobody can seem to come up with a crime.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm specifically doing.
Okay. No, I don't need to hear a backbencher. I'm sure you're a good guy, and I'm sure you're trying to do a lot, but it's not, as Maria Bartiromo says, and man, she lit him up.
We all heard her. It's not enough to set up a committee just called the weaponization of the federal government. That's not doing it. We want action. And that's why we're here today. We're here at the beck and call of Trump fanatics and talking heads on cable and internet talk shows in the MAGA world who, like Bartiromo and Bannon, have goaded this committee to act. Because the purpose of this select committee is, in fact, to be an arm of the Trump campaign and take his orders. And yes, we know your mad things are not going your way. Republicans are upset because the Justice Department has determined that it must prosecute Donald Trump because the allegations against President Biden amount to nothing, both at the Justice Department and even in this chamber in the House, by the very committees Republicans created to investigate President Biden. This committee and Republicans are mad because Robert Hur, himself a Republican political appointee, fully and completely exonerated President Biden while specifically outlining, a Republican appointee, outlining the reasons that Donald Trump deserved to be prosecuted and President Biden does not. They're mad because he had the gumption, I'll use that word, to tell the truth as to what facts have been shown Trump to have. The committee wants to allege the fact that Donald Trump repeatedly, and this was a discussion just in the opening statement, talking about Jack Smith and what he did with classified information. But the fact is that Trump didn't just mishandle classified information, he hid classified information and legally pertinent documents from the FBI and other law enforcement. Donald Trump ordered his aides to destroy documents and then repeatedly lied about doing so. Donald Trump even tricked his own lawyers into making false statements on his behalf, potentially implicating those lawyers in his criminal schemes. That's why Donald Trump is currently facing 40 charges in a federal court in Florida for knowingly mishandling, withholding, hiding, lying, destroying classified documents in a way that put our national security at severe risk. That's why he's facing 34 charges in New York State Court for falsifying business records and making hush money payments to catch and kill information that would be harmful to his reputation and his presidential campaign. That's why he's charged with 4 felony counts, including conspiracy to defraud the United States and conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding for attempting to overturn the 2020 election. And that's why, despite the machinations and attempted character assassination of a prosecutor in Georgia, that he's charged with 10 counts for attempting to intimidate election officials while trying to force them to accept a slate of false electors, again, part of his efforts to overturn an election. Trump is charged in these cases because there is sufficient evidence to reasonably believe that he committed almost 100 serious crimes. In this country, no one should be above the law. So just for a little legal lesson, I strongly suspect the defendant may be watching, or his minions, or others. No, Donald, even a president can't shoot someone on Fifth Avenue in broad daylight and get away with it. That's not going to happen. To my Republican counterparts in the majority, you claim that you want to fight a weaponized executive branch. You do so by calling in far-right witnesses to spew conspiracies about a deep state, or by calling witnesses who have testified under oath that they literally are missing parts of their brain, and another who self-identified as a time traveler from Canada. That, my friends, is the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. To be the party of law enforcement and be led by a man currently facing 100 serious charges. We fail to understand that we are playing white knights for the most radical fringes of our society, while making frequent references to Big Brother, no less. They themselves are growing embodiment of George Orwell's 1984. Now, I know I've said it before, and if people don't know, I've been a Republican. I was a Republican appointee when some of my counterparts were still in high school. I served a Republican president. But this is not the Republican Party. This is a cult of personality where Donald Trump exercises totalitarian control. This is a subcommittee that intimidates witnesses who disagree with them, questioning Americans' loyalty to their country if they don't support Donald Trump's agenda. This subcommittee is using its platform to bully American people into believing falsehoods. Falsehoods which serve little purpose other than to scare everyday Americans, spread confusion, and attempt to re-elect Donald Trump. It's a subcommittee that is taking orders from a disgraced former president. I see members rolling their eyes, they're all upset. You don't believe me? Think I'm making up that Trump directs the actions of this select committee? You think that everyone is not jumping through hoops to please Donald Trump? Follow the facts. Who was among the select few Donald Trump called on January 6th while encouraging thousands of rioters to overtake the Capitol and steal the election? Individuals from this select committee. Members here have refused to answer a subpoena related to that call from Trump and the attack on the Capitol. Members of Congress said at rally after rally, I'm busting my tail to get Donald Trump reelected. We need to make sure Donald Trump wins. It's so important that we stay engaged and help Donald Trump get back the White House. That's what members of this committee have said. And it's our duty to call out bias and hidden agendas of the committee. It's a sham, solely designed to serve, as like we have said before, as the legislative arm of Donald Trump's re-election campaign. That's what this select committee is. This select committee's efforts are transparent. And you know what else? They're expensive. Last hearing, we talked about the $20 million this committee has spent already on this witch hunt. And they still have nothing to show for it, which explains why we're frantically calling last-minute hearings over and over again to distract from Trump's criminal trials. Just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. Anything to try to keep Donald Trump happy. What a strategy, and what an expensive failure. I've tried to use this committee for the good of Americans. I've talked to the chairman and to others about examining moments in our nation's history when the powers of the federal government have been abused. We have seen reports that the IRS has a real problem of racial bias in its audits. A year ago, the IRS admitted that Black taxpayers are audited at disproportionately higher rates than other racial groups. Are we talking about that weaponization? Is there a discussion about that or any other hearing beyond defending Donald Trump and his election? No. I applaud the DOJ for not giving into political pressure and following the facts where they lead. No one is above the law, no matter how hard this committee tries to make it otherwise. Thank you, and I yield back. On the ATF officers that were there to execute that warrant, what's very interesting, and I'd like to admit and submit into the record a letter that's been sent from ATF to Mr. Jim Jordan, dated May 21st, 2024, from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Explosives.
Without objection.
Thank you. And in that letter, it reminds this Congress that in 2021, the department directed its law enforcement components, including ATF, to develop plans for a phased implementation of body-worn cameras. But the very thing that they're trying to do, which is to eliminate the ATF, is the reason that they don't have body cams, because they didn't give them the funding for it. Congress has specifically stated in its appropriations that they don't want to fund ATF. They don't want to give them the money to be able to operate. They don't want to give Mr. Klickner's clients sufficient ATF officers to be able to quickly do the kind of paperwork that they need. That's why they're taking so long. They don't want to give them the funding to be able to have body cams. And so ATF has only a third of its individuals who are wearing body cams, and have specifically requested from Congress the funding so that everyone can wear those body cams. And my colleagues have denied that. They're the ones who have said they don't need that money. Let's get rid of ATF. They have legislation to abolish the ATF, the elimination of the ATF Act, abolish the ATF Act, and eliminate this woke, weaponized agency. Everything's woke when you don't like it. Eliminate it, and that way, these are the reasons. So they want to have it both ways. They want to say that they don't have body cams, and that's the reason they're doing, and you know, we feel sorry for people who haven't had the body cams, but they're the reason they don't have them. Point it right back at yourself why those body cams weren't on them, and see if that continues to work for you. But you know, we're also talking about another thing that was discussed, which I found very interesting, was that individuals who are doing this as hobbies. One of the reasons that we changed the rule to the engaged in business rule is because an individual who can have as his primary income a large income can then sell a lot of firearms and not be considered a firearms dealer because their primary income is more than the firearms income that they're doing, even if it's voluminous, the amount of firearm sales that they're making, if their primary income level is higher. And so, a couple of years ago in 2022, President Biden signed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which has, as was one of its rules, a rule with regard to no longer can an individual hide the fact that they are, by all accounts, by a common law person's accounts, an actual firearms dealer and not a hobbyist. And, you know, one of the ways I would look at determining if, in fact, a person is a hobbyist as opposed to a firearms dealer is, you know, Ms. Sampson, in your opinion, is someone who buys and then almost immediately resells at least 150 firearms in a 3-year period a hobbyist or an unlicensed gun dealer?
If that is what a person was doing, then they would be more likely to be an unlicensed gun dealer.
Is it concerning to you if someone sells 150 firearms and conducts no background check on the individuals who are purchasing those firearms?
Yes, because ATF data shows that those unlicensed and unbackground check sales usually end up going to prohibited purchasers.
I'd like to submit for the record the actual search warrant, the unsealed application for a search warrant, and the affidavit, and other information therein, which on page 28 states that as of February 27, 2024, approximately 6 firearms are known to have been recovered in the commission of crimes. Those are related to the firearms from that Mr. Malinowski purchased and then sold.
Mr. Chairman, could I?
No, I'm speaking. It's my time.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. And then, in your opinion, Ms. Sampson, would ATF be justified in being concerned when someone sells a firearm to an individual who has been convicted of robbery and is prohibited from owning a gun?
Yes, because selling to a prohibited purchaser is a violation of the law.
In your opinion, would ATF be justified in being concerned
lady.
when selling a firearm that lands in the hands of a 15-year-old member of the Nortina criminal street gang?
Yes.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Mr. Cummins, I think Mr. Stubbe will give you a chance to respond.
Mr. Cummins, you wanted to respond to that? I just wanted to quickly say.
Is this his time now?
Yes, it's member for as much time as she'd like. I'll give you 6, 7 minutes, 8 minutes if you'd like, and then or a closing statement after that, and then I have a couple more questions, and then we'll be adjourned. Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. I don't know what to do with all that time. Kind of freaked me out when you said that. I started,
You can always yield it back to me.
Oh, no, I don't think I'm not giving up what's given to me, I'll tell you that much. You never know when you can get that, but I appreciate it, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank our witnesses for being here, each one of you. Thank you for expressing your ideas and your thoughts. And I did want to ask some follow-up questions, though, to some of those. Mr. Inspector General Horowitz, my colleagues across the aisle have said that the Inspector General found that the FBI intentionally weaponizing the security clearance process to purge conservatives from its ranks. Mr. Inspector General, did your office find that the FBI has a pattern or practice of misusing the security clearance adjudication process to purge certain FBI employees?
We have not made such a finding.
Okay. And also, there were allegations made that the FBI has weaponized this, any findings that it was related specifically to individuals who might have expressed sentiments with regard to January 6th. Did you find that?
We haven't made such a finding. We've actually, Congresswoman, had complaints come in from both sides on these issues. On one side, complaints about field offices not taking action in January 6 cases, and on the other side, complaints about offices that did take matters in January 6 cases.
So, as usual, it's across the board of the political
We have
spectrum.
complaints from whistleblowers on both sides on that issue.
And that is par for the course you have found in the FBI and in your position over hearing from your other Inspector General officers that complaints may come from both sides of the political spectrum.
I've certainly seen, with regard to the DOJ law enforcement components, issues coming from various perspectives. I will say non-ideological, ideological complaints across.
What about religious? Have you made any findings that the FBI security clearance process targets Christians?
We've not made such a finding.
Or targeting military veterans?
We've not made such a finding.
Thank you. You know, I understand my colleagues' concern that it would appear that Democrats are not taking the issue of whistleblowers seriously. And I think we do. We have a committee for that, the Oversight Committee, for which when I was a member of the Oversight, that's when I first met Mr. Horowitz, was in having oversight over different agencies and questioning you about some of your findings there, some of which, when I first came to Congress, were targeted against a Democratic administration, at the time, the Obama administration. We've gone through a Trump administration, we're now in a Biden administration, and so the vagaries of political persuasion, you've seen them all. But I think the reason that the Democratic members have been bringing up Project 2025 and President Trump is because it presents a global threat, a true weaponization of offices and of a position against the American people as a whole. We see places like North Korea, Hungary, Iran, now Venezuela, where those citizens could not have imagined 20, 30 years before, potentially, that they are living under a dictatorial rule. I went to school with individuals, I'm dating myself, in the early 80s with students who had fled Iran. I have been around young people in undergrad who have fled North Korea. And the notion that anything like that could happen in this country seems so antithetical to our thinking. But we cannot drop the ball in when we see an individual or a group of individuals who have power trying to take that control. And it is our opinion, many of our opinion, that Trump, for his own purposes, has now joined forces with individuals who have offered Project 2025 as a means to an end for each one of their own desires. I would ask to submit to the record a CNN article, Trump claims not to know who is behind Project 2025. CNN review found at least 140 people who work for him are involved.
Objection.
Thank you. And in this article, and in other places, we will see the nexus of relationships between the president and individuals who have written this. 6 of his former cabinet secretaries, 4 individuals nominated by the former president as ambassadors, his first deputy chief of staff, my former colleague Mark Meadows, and also his longtime advisor, Stephen Miller, who were advising Project 2025. Federal Communications Commissioner under President Trump, Brendan Carr, Lisa Laurenti, who was a delegate to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, all wrote components of Project 2025. We have the American Accountability Foundation putting together a roster of current federal workers it suspects could impede Trump's plan for a second term. I would direct your attention to what we have up there on the screen, which shows so many associates who have, in fact, contributed to the transitional plan for a presidential Trump next term that are part of his orbit. Paul Dance, top official in Trump's White House. We have Ben Carson, former HUD secretary. Christopher Miller, acting Secretary of Defense. Peter Navarro wrote a section defending the former president's trade policies. This has been drafted as the next conservative president's last opportunity. The last opportunity for what? Not the America we know now, a different form of America, one that meets the demands of specific individuals, not all of us. One women that does not include us having complete autonomy of ourselves. One that puts a form of Christianity that may not be my form of Christianity. That's why we have a separation of church and state, so that we can all worship our God as we wish. That's not what Project 2025 is looking towards. Today you may be part of it. Tomorrow you may not be. Today it may help you. Tomorrow it may not. I know I'm on the front line. I know my community's on the front line, but tomorrow it may be yours. Next week, next month, 180 days he's given himself. 2 years from now, it may be your son, your daughter, pointing in the military, pointing a weapon at their fellow citizen, at their brother or their sister who are protesting on the streets of America. Because yes, in Project 2025, it allows the president to direct the active military to come to the streets of the United States against those that he deems as political rivals. That's in Project 2025. Those are the things that are in there against us as Americans. And that's the reason why, Mr. Chairman, we keep talking about it. Not because whistleblowers' issues are not unimportant, but because this is a clear and present threat right now to the American people that we need to join forces with and stop. So I want to thank you for the additional time. And while we're on the recess, God bless you and your family. And I pray safety for all of us as members, all of people who have spoken out, and individuals, we may not agree with one another, but I pray that this election goes safely and that we are all back here again to continue the people's business.
I agree. Generally yields back. The ranking member is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Now that we've finished with the novice congresswoman from Wyoming, I guess that's what we're calling first-year members of Congress now, first-term members. I don't know where that came from or what that's supposed to mean. But let's move on. Instead of name-calling, let's just do the work that the people have us here for, whether we like individuals or not. Which sounds ridiculously immature. There was a discussion earlier about Jack Smith, and it was alleged that he is engaged in bias, partisan actions before. Is the discussion, I went and looked at some of the cases that he has, in fact, taken up in his long career, both in New York, Brooklyn, as well as at The Hague. Ms. Winebanks, are you familiar with former Representative Rick Renzi? He was a Republican member of the House that this Jack Smith prosecuted. Are you familiar with the name Senator John Edwards? He was a Democrat that Jack Smith also prosecuted. Republican member, Governor Bob McDonnell, when he was in the office of the prosecutor at the International Criminal Court of The Hague, many individuals from all world parties and leaders. Are you familiar, I don't know if you're familiar with an individual named Ronell Wilson.
I am not.
Ronell Wilson was an individual in New York who murdered 2 New York City Police Department officers. That was prosecuted by Jack Smith. He also prosecuted, however, police who brutalized Abner Louima. I'm sure you're familiar with that name.
I am.
So this is an individual who seems to be a prosecutor willing to go after anybody, no matter what their party is, if, and reviewing and investigating the information, they believe that that person has broken the law. And that's what I call a good prosecutor, having been one myself. Mr. Hamilton, are you aware that Chairman Jordan filed multiple amicus briefs in the case of Missouri v. Biden, now called Murphy versus Missouri?
I am.
And in fact, you are the attorney of record on those briefs, is that correct?
I am one of the attorneys.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. Were you provided access to the committee's transcribed interviews and deposition transcripts as part of the work and preparation of those briefs?
I was provided with, yes, information, absolutely.
And that included transcribed interviews and depositions?
I was provided with lots of information. I'm not going to get into all the details here because doing so would reveal the existence of communications between an attorney and a client.
Okay, that's fine. Do you, in your briefs, one of those instances of those briefs, you claimed that the FBI witness told the committee that the supposed Biden laptop was real, quote unquote, suggesting that the FBI had authenticated it. Do you recall that?
Do you have the brief in front of you?
Yes.
Could you read it to me? And I'll let you know if I recall it.
Okay, can you hold the time for me, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Thank you. Page 21. Is it which one? Okay. Reading from the brief, on page 28 of the brief that's listed, brief representatives Jim Jordan, Kelly Armstrong, Andy Biggs, Dan Bishop, et cetera, that was filed with the court. On page 28, it states that, but of course the FBI knew not just the absence of evidence suggesting any foreign connection, the FBI knew the laptop was real. Do you recall that?
I do recall.
Okay. Do you also recall that when the individual stated, the witness later said that, suggesting that the FBI had authenticated it? However, that completely ignored the fact that the witness later said in that same transcription, that same interview, that anyone who claimed that the laptop had been authenticated would be, quote, misrepresenting her testimony. Do you recall her having said that?
I can't tell you today if I recall that or not.
Okay, so your brief suggests that one particular nonprofit, well, your brief then does not give the whole story by stating that the individual said the laptop was real from the FBI, misrepresenting that it had been authenticating, when she just meant that it existed, not that it had been authenticated. Do you know that difference?
Are you disputing the reality of Hunter Biden's laptop?
I am disputing your brief, which makes it seem that the authentication of what was in the laptop was there.
But so I'm trying to understand where you're going. Are you trying?
I just asked a
are
simple
you
question.
disputing the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop?
I am disputing that it had
purpose of
been
your questioning of
authenticated
me?
by the FBI. Do you know if it had been authenticated by the
Whether the
FBI?
FBI authenticated it
You
or
said
not,
it
the
had. You
existence
said it
of
had.
it was authenticated
You
because
said it
was
had
real.
in the
What you're,
brief.
You're getting into
You said it
word
had in the
jujitsu.
brief. That's the point. Moving on. I could go literally for hours. Your brief wrongly suggests that one particular nonprofit is in fact a government entity, and even includes a graphic from that nonprofit website that was cropped to omit language stating that the nonprofit is autonomous, meaning it's independent from the government. Literally on and on. It's just like this hearing of misrepresentations of the truth. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I would point out that last week the committee deposed Mr. Brady Olson, FBI agent, who said that at the time, October 2020, the FBI had no evidence that the laptop story was a hack and leak operation. No evidence. So they had done exactly what Mr. Hamilton described in his well-written brief. I now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stubbe.